Can you be integral without an integral map? I think is sort of the interesting question. Can you be naked without your maps and still have that kind of integral consciousness?
In my view, a very significant subsect of people at early teal, they're so obsessed with the map that there's no way in which to let the map go or to just be one with what is. And I think that's problematic for me, at least.
And one criticism that I have of the integral philosophies and theories and models thus far, at least, its lack of focus on improvisation. It isn't in jazz or in comedy or theater just making stuff up. It is making stuff up, true, but to do it at a high level is so much study. But improvisation is actually fundamental to human life.
What's up? I am David Long. I'm here to talk to you today about integral theory and improvisation. There's a couple different ideas around this topic that I've heard thrown around. One of them seems to be from a more postmodernist, maybe Buddhist kind of place, where a person might say something like, you think too much, or you're constantly stuck in all of these boxes, these systems and these theories and ways of thinking and talking. And the other one, the more sophisticated one, seems to be more saying something like, with this integral theory of everything, do we become just so systematic that we're constantly always thinking in terms of our systems and our boxes? And how does that leave room for things that are outside of our current way of thinking? I hope to address both of these points and say more about what I think integral practice looks like in the world in general. Now myself, I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar for about 18 years. I can play a couple other instruments as well, but guitar is my main instrument. And I've been in a couple improv bands. Here's a link to the best of Good Noon Scholars, an improv band I was in back some years ago. And even now, in my hip-hop project, I also make a lot of my music in a very improv kind of style. I leave a lot of space for what comes up authentically, and I play things in a way that are more off the cuff and less trying to master some perfectly written piece and execute it to the letter. I'm also an MC, and so I have done a little bit of improv in terms of like freestyling. I'm not great at that. That's a difficult thing to be able to do. I think it's one thing to talk about dumb things and to insult people, but to really be able to speak about something that you're proud of saying can often take some thought to express. It doesn't just necessarily come out, at least not for me. Maybe some other people are wise enough and practiced enough at freestyle where they can just say some super intelligent thing that rhymes right off the top of their head. I've also done a bit of freestyle improv filmmaking. And also with philosophy, I do a lot of communication with different people at different stages of development. I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at freestyling my way through skillful conversations that resonate with different people at different levels, but it's hard to say because it's hard to know what kind of influence you have on people's life. But I feel like, when we're really at our best, we probably feel like we just made some kind of a positive impact on the person's life we just talked to. So point being, I think I'm somewhat qualified to speak on this topic of improvisation. One of the things that we've learned about development is that overall stage development happens through the development of individual lines. And some lines grow ahead of others, and some lines are kind of behind. Improv is a line. It's correlated to lines like cognition and identity and interpersonal lines, morality, and of course creativity. The thing about improv, because it is so much a part of our everyday life, there are certain skills that you can learn about improv or going into a flow state that you can apply to all different things that you do in your life. All kinds of projects will benefit from the knowledge and skill that you can get from working on this one line. Certain things like listening, being a good listener, being sympathetic, and paying attention to what's going on around you. Not just thinking about what the next thing you're going to say is, but being really open and sensitive, and maybe doing less. In different kind of jams that I've had with other people, some of the best players are the people who are confident enough to assert themselves and to fill in some of those blank spots, but are not so egotistical that they feel like they have to constantly be the star of the jam. In fact, some of the best musical unfoldings that happen in terms of improvisation happen when everybody is sort of doing the least. Everyone's sort of leaving space for everyone else. This kind of listening, this is one of those skills that you can apply to a whole bunch of different disciplines. It's good in fighting, it's good in sex, it's good in conversation, it's good in music, it's good in acting. Having that supporting role and being sympathetic to others is part of what makes a person a good actor, or a good musician, or a good lover, or a good fighter, to be able to work with what's given to you and to respond accordingly. But to employ a musical metaphor, let's imagine that you're trying to learn a new instrument. Can you just improv? Can you just pick up the instrument and start playing it? No, you probably can't, unless you have some kind of other knowledge from other instruments that you're bringing to this instrument, and you can kind of figure it out. If you're just picking up an instrument that you don't know, you're probably not going to be able to play it well. So what do you have to do? You have to learn a little bit of theory. And I mean, if you don't know some basic theory, you're not going to be able to play any instrument. The theory gives you some basic structure to work with. It even gives you basic things like key, measures, signatures, and some of the basics for the fundamentals of at least what we have in Western music in terms of our ideas about structure. So if you ever get this criticism like you think too much, I always ask, too much for what? Too much for who? Too much to what end? What am I missing out on? How is it too much? I often feel like when people tell me I think too much, it's more the case that they don't think enough. And when they're telling me I'm thinking too much in terms of boxes, I think basically what it comes down to is they're telling me is that they don't want to hear what I have to say. They're not interested in my judgments, and they're gonna write off my perspective as overly intellectual. There's all kinds of defense mechanisms people have, and different justifications people have for wanting to dismiss your ideas. But hopefully we can do better than that. So that's why I think it's important to ask too much for what or how. And hopefully if they have a good point, they can tell you what it is. Maybe they have a point. Maybe there is too much for something. If you get caught up in analysis paralysis and you think too much and you can't play anything because you're paralyzed by fear and overthinking, that's one issue. But if you actually go to play, what are you playing? You're playing notes, you're playing scales, you're playing in a key. Once you're really in the flow of expressing yourself, you're not really thinking about theory. But when I go to explain to you about how I'm expressing myself, you're definitely thinking in some kind of language, which means structure, which means boxes, which means theory. So if you go to communicate to somebody about what you played, even if it was totally improvised, if they don't know theory and you're speaking to them in a theoretical language that they don't really understand or follow, then they're probably going to say something like, "You use too much theory, man." I think it's kind of a big misconception to think that a person can communicate beyond language or without symbols or without thinking. Something KRS-ONE says that I think is relevant here is,
you know, you don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain. And the more words your brain has, the more things you can see.
So to some extent, no. We can't think beyond boxes or speak beyond symbols or play without theory and notes. That is how we know how to express ourselves. So what we do when we learn to play a new instrument is we study the theory and we practice our scales. And when a person at early teal or early integral stages is constantly framing everything in terms of the map, what they're probably doing is learning to use the map, learning to speak that language, learning the theory, so that way they could apply it in a more seamless way to the point where the map kind of disappears. You don't get to a point where you can transcend and include the theory until you've actually included the theory. And as we practice our scales, we learn muscle memory. We program ourselves to think and see and express ourselves in these ways to the point where our response becomes automatic. Same thing in fighting. The reason that you practice all of the different stances and moves and takedowns is so that way when the time comes, when the real fight is upon you, or when you're in the moment and you're about to play, you know what to do. You have the tools to express yourself. When you do play that improv lick or riff, it is informed by your knowledge of the theory. When you do that takedown move, that is informed by the practice of that move that you've done a bunch of times before. And it's also informed by an implicit understanding of the 4 quadrants at play. For example, in music, it's informed by the style that you bring to it, the time in which you feel it is your turn to insert something into the mix, the beat and the rhythm and the key of the song, as well as the mood of the song. If you're fighting, you could think of your style and your opponent's style and the different strengths and weaknesses you may or may not have. There's the different moves that you do or don't do, as well as the dynamic of the fight and the environment in which it takes place. And if we're talking about being a skillful actor, some of that has to do with an understanding of your own character, who you want to be, how you want to portray yourself, the relationship you have to the person that you're talking to, and of course, information about their own stages of development and all that kind of stuff, as well as an understanding of the topic at hand and the message that you want to get across, the mood and the environment and the situation that you're in. Now, all of that is looking at the situation through the lens of integral theory. And I would agree that in the moment of improv, we're not necessarily categorizing everything as it's arising, but a skillful improviser can and will take all of these factors into account when doing their improvisation. We can only improvise within the structures that we know and understand. We only bring our limited perspective and experience to any moment. That's the hermeneutic circle. We always understand this moment in the light of all the moments that have come before. If someone brings a problem to us, we can only deal with it with the tools that we have. So part of learning maps and theories and expanding our knowledge of these different theories and techniques and tools and stuff is to expand our toolbox, to be able to be more skillful in the moment. The best improvisers, the best musicians that I know of are not people who were like, oh man, forget about theory, forget about trying to understand the boxes, I'm just gonna play. They are people who spent hours and hours and hours thinking about theory and practicing their scales, so that way when it came to the point to where they were ready to improvise, they had a million tricks up their sleeve to be able to authentically bring a bunch of different styles to bear, whatever they felt that the situation and circumstance called for. And that, to me, is what it is to be a skilled improviser. It's not beyond maps. Maybe you could say it transcends and includes maps. So to respond to what Greg said about how integral theory doesn't include improvisation, I would say to him that musical theory doesn't include improvisation. Theory and stylistic application are different subjects. Obviously, I do think it's a cool topic. I would also agree that ideas about becoming and creating and self-mastery, magic, and improv, the more exterior quadrant, spiritual practices, are definitely not talked about as much in integral circles. In fact, I recently made a video kind of expanding the 3 S's of integral spiritual practice into the 4 S's of integral spiritual practice, and I tried to kind of flesh out these exterior quadrant spiritual practices in a way to talk about them more fully. So I do agree that these are ideas that aren't talked about enough, about how to enact some of these things and how we should be with them in the world. Speaking of which, relating back to these ideas about how devoting oneself to a line can help overall development, how we have to have some kind of balance between intuition and theory, I would like to present probably the greatest implicitly integral martial arts expert. Bruce Lee talks about some of these topics.
I've been talking to Bruce Lee after he left the University of Washington, where he studied of all things philosophy, if you can believe that.
Martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art. To me, at least the way that when I teach it, all type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge. It might sound too philosophical, but it's acting, or acting, unacting. Actually, you see, it's a combination of both. Here it is the natural instinct, and here is control. You are to combine the two in harmony. Not, if you have one to the extreme, you will be very unscientific. If you have another to the extreme, you become all of a sudden a mechanical man, no longer a human being. So it is a successful combination of both. So therefore, it is not only, therefore it's not pure naturalness or unnaturalness. The ideal is unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness. You see, actually, I do not teach, karate, because I do not believe in styles anymore. Basically, we have only 2 hands and 2 feet. So styles tends to not only separate man, because they have their own doctrines, and then the doctrine became the gospel truth, that you cannot change, But if you do not have styles, if you just say, well, here I am, as a human being, how can I express myself? Totally and completely. Now, that way, you won't create a style, because style is a crystallization, that way, it's a process of continuing growth. Ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself. Now, it is very difficult to do. It is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky, and be flooded with a cocky feeling, and then feel like pretty cool and all that. Or I can make all kinds of phony things, you see what I mean, blinded by it, or I can show you some really fancy movement. But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, and to express myself honestly, now that, my friend, is very hard to do. And you have to train. You have to keep your reflexes so that when you want it, it's there. When you want to move, you're moving. And when you move, you are determined to move. Not taking 1 inch, not anything less than that. If I want to punch, I'm going to do it, man, and I'm going to do it, you see. So, I mean, so that is the type of thing you have to train yourself into it, to become one with the... You think, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
So if Bruce Lee is talking about how he's beyond styles, and he's talking about being formless and being like water, but he has a method for that. He has a style. He's developed a system called Jeet Kune Do, or the way of the intercepting fist. And it's a basic philosophy that sort of sets you up to be able to freestyle. He's got a method and a practice where you ground yourself and you balance yourself so that way you lead with your strong hand and you have your weak hand behind. And all of these things that are designed to help you to respond more naturally. But there is a method to it. Now let's watch a short video about a freestyle rapper I like who hosts a cypher for young kids, trying to get them to a place where they can experience what it feels like to really get into a flow state and feel what it feels like to just click and really be in the moment.
Anticon MC Dose 1 teaches his Wednesday night freestyle class about ciphers, crutches, getting open, and the world beyond Lil Wayne. And as we observed, these Oakland-based teenagers seem to school him just as much as he's schooling them.
Freestyling, the definition of it became spontaneous, improvised, generated in-the-moment content. I think the best freestylers are both unbridled on the mouth level with what they're doing vocally and are unbridled with content. Freestyling is not kicking writtens, also is another way to describe it. Cipher is what we do, the action, the noun, the verb. It's a circle in which you rap. When you're in a true and living cipher, you don't get in it unless you rap, generally. You know, it's not a bystander sort of affair. But these kids, they cut each other off in order to keep it moving, because not everyone is comfortable or at the same exact point on the learning curve. What we enforce with the kids is not letting the ball drop. So don't let the beat die, don't let the energy drive die. You know, keep yourself and your teammates inspired. Because I have zero experience as a teacher and 1 million plus hours as a cipher rat, so it's like I really try and just behave the way I would. I really listen to them. I get inspired when they get open, and I try and give them the respect that, like, you know, I ask. You know, so I teach via osmosis. And then Kev, the other instructor, is really awesome. Kev is the one who will lecture them if they go on about selling invisible amounts of cocaine. Maybe the teacher-student experience that doesn't have a boundary for them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they could call me or Kev Four Eyes when I have my glasses on. You know what I mean? We actually are not only inviting that, we're encouraging them to speak out of turn. For most of these kids, this allows them to open up, you know, because I think when they're sitting there writing rhymes, they would never say some of the shit. Like, this is the best line of my last semester. This kid, Ben, said, MCs are confused like they just became parents. Which is, I fucking shivered. I was like, oh, dude, that was amazing.
Basically, I come to class and experiment with different styles, and then it helps me incorporate that into my writing, and then my writing helps me incorporate certain stuff into my freestyling. It all comes back and it's all still back into one little ball.
Getting open is the prime objective. It's sort of like blacking out, but with lots of light, and all the words seem to fall into place and make sense. Sometimes it's your mouth failing you, sometimes it's your mind failing you, but either way, a crutch is what gets you from one topic to the next. You'll see we all have crutches today in freestyle class. Trying to really, in this class, teach them to freestyle and then teach them to listen. I say, man, rapping with that little dude, Tyrone, it's so inspiring, man. I just get chills and just, all I want to do is kill it, man.
I mean, he's only 13.
It's fucking killing me, man.
It's amazing.
Making my eyes bleed. Yeah, it was great. And then Diario's like,
My flows, they sound like that calligraphy. I'm evidential, some say I am detrimental to the game.
I just, you know, they make me make the sounds I make when I rap with dope rappers. And that's all I ask. And the class wasn't, you know, always like that. So it's really, we're lucky.
I'm gorilla in the jungle, give me the hair. With the lion print on my back, give me air. Oh, I need to breathe on. It's beautiful and truly distinguished when such young ones can put wings on the very back of some old English, and I am proud of it. Truly it does it. In the circular world we all buzz it. What did we learn out of this year? Something like creatively composing what makes out of a day is better than going into this world and dying.
Charles Limb, he did a TED Talk where he put a bunch of different improvisers under MRI scanners and looked to see what was happening in their brains. And he saw the self-reflecting part of the brains kind of quieted down while the self-expression part of the brains sort of amped up, which I think is pretty interesting.
Now, these are multifunctional areas of the brain. As I like to say, these are not the jazz areas of the brain, right? They do a whole host of things that have to do with self-reflection, introspection, working memory, and so forth. Really, consciousness is seated in the frontal lobe. But we have this combination of an area that's thought to be involved in self-monitoring turning off, and this area that's thought to be autobiographical or self-expressive turning on. And we think that at least a reasonable hypothesis is that to be creative, you have to have this weird dissociation in your frontal lobe. One area turns on, and a big area shuts off so that you're not inhibited, so that you're willing to make mistakes, so that you're not constantly shutting down all of these new generative impulses.
For anyone who's an artist, I think we really know what it feels like to be in this state where we're just flowing and it's just happening and we're just doing it and we're like getting out of our own way in some kind of a sense. It's a beautiful thing. Last but not least, I want to talk about this idea of yes and.
Well, when we hear the word improvisation, we all think of something. Who here thinks of jazz music? Anybody? Yeah, there you are, sexy. Who here thinks of like freestyle rapping or hip hop? Anyone? Yeah, there we go. We got some hands. Who thinks of MacGyver? There it is, right? Mac, right? Who here thinks of improv comedy when they hear improv? You can raise your hand. Improvisation is all of those things. But what I love about it is that it's not just one of those things. Improvisation isn't actually even a thing when you think about it. Improvisation is a process. It's a way of making a thing. It's not a product that I can give you or show you. What I do is I improvise theater or hip hop or explosive devices. The first thing I have to teach, especially with adults, is play. The second step, let yourself fail. The next step is listening. The next step is probably the most agreed upon rule of all of improvisation, across all schools of thought, is to say yes. So we're going to do a fun little demonstration, because that's way more fun than me talking about it. What I need y'all to do is just say yes for me on the count of 3. Can you do that? 1, 2, 3? Yes! Good. So now, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to just say yes to those questions. Do you want to tell a story with me? Yes! Is this story about a knight? Yes! Is this knight wearing shining armor? Yes! Is he going to save a damsel? Yes! Is she being held by a dragon? Yes! Is the dragon breathing fire? Yes! Does he save her with courage and bravery? Yes! And do they live happily ever after? Yes! Oh, isn't that great? Nice work. Nice work. That was really good. We did that. We just did that. All right, now let's do it again, and this time I want you to say no. Do you want to tell a story with me? No! I'll just go. All right, I'll get on. Now that incredibly elaborate demonstration we just did proves one very simple point about improvisation, is that a series of yeses will take us somewhere. A series of no's doesn't even get started. Doesn't go anywhere. We all just sit there going, no, 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 no. And the saddest part is that you can have 10,000 yeses in a row, and it just takes one no to stop it all and ruin it. So say yes. Now the next step is sort of in conjunction with this one, and that is to say and. Right? Yes men are great. We've probably all met them, and they make you feel really good about what you're doing. Right? All of you let me tell a story by saying yes. Thank you for that. But and men are the people we really want to work with. The people that say yes to our idea and give us something else. Right? And then what happens is you bring a brick, and I bring a brick, and then someone else brings a brick, and we just pile them on top of each other until we've built something that none of us could have built on our own. Play the game. Relax and have fun.
So the final thing I'm going to talk about right now is about something I learned from my friend Kevin. And I think this is an important thing to think about when it comes to communicating to another person. I try to lead with a yes, with an agreement. I try to find something about what they've said or what they've offered or what they've done that I can say yes about. Yes, I like this. Yes, I like what you're doing. I am on the same page with you. I also agree about your project. I care about the same thing that you care about. In some way. And then I try really hard not to say but. Even if I do have a criticism, I would much rather try to frame it in a yes and. Like, yes, I am super invested in your project, and I can't wait to do this and this. My concern is this and this and this. Then it's more like you're in the same project with a person, like we're collaborating and building, than it is that we're correcting them. So as a kind of a judgmental person, this is sort of something I have to keep in my mind. It's a method that I try and think about, is to start with the yes and don't say but. Say yes and. Try to build. To me, that's a good way to make one's ideas less threatening and to be a more collaborative kind of person. To not shut people down as much and to try to build them up. Now, these are just some methods and some things that I've thought about in relation to improv, and I've tried to frame them somewhat in an integral framework. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Check out some of those integral podcasts. They got some cool things that they're talking about, and it's good to be plugged into the integral community. Go check out Greg's Daily Evolver Talks, where he's schooling us on jazz. Those are super cool. Don't forget to like if you like, subscribe, and thanks again for your time. Peace. Hey, what's up? I am David Long. I'm here today to announce my new Patreon page, and I'm super excited about this because I'm really poor and I give everything away for free, and that doesn't help me to make more things. So this is actually a really cool new opportunity that the internet is making possible. Basically, the idea is it's kind of like a Kickstarter page, except for the support is ongoing. So as you probably know, I'm an artist and I paint, and a lot of that stuff goes onto the Society 6 page, and that can be turned into a whole bunch of different kinds of swag. I'm also a musician. I make albums and music videos.
No, I don't fear the reaper. I can go deeper than any ocean, river, or pond. I am staying higher than any pinnacle you've ever been on, bringing light to the world like it's shining at dawn. It's so much more complex than just rights and wrongs, still weighing these pros and cons.
I'm a philosopher. I put together all kinds of philosophy videos, mostly about integral subjects, integral philosophy. So I've made this really simple. I know some people are really poor, and some people are doing better than others, so I have all different kinds of settings which I think are pretty reasonable. From $3 a month to $20 a month, depending on your budget. I've got rewards and all kinds of special stuff that I'm going to do, and every one of my Patreons is going to get a gift at the end of the year relative to how much they support me. So if you support me less, you might get something small, maybe a sticker, whereas if you support me more, you're going to get something bigger. Maybe a mug, maybe a t-shirt, something like that. But anyways, thank you very much. I appreciate your support. This is a really exciting thing for me. If I can get enough supporters, I can work on my art, my philosophy, my music full time, and I can bring more and more value back to you. Who knows, I might even have enough time at that point to go back to school. My mom wanted me to say that. You don't care about that. You only love me for my art. But thank you so much for your support. It means so much to me. I'm so glad to be able to bring more value and more art and more philosophy into your life. Thanks so much for appreciating it. Peace.